Don't move. Keep it locked.
You already know.
You're listening to the Forfeit Fatherhood Podcast. And we're having conversations with dope dads covering the 4 pillars of fatherhood. We call it the Fit Fatherhood Formula. Faith, family, finance, and fitness. That's right. These dads are setting the pace in business and fatherhood. This show isn't only about the outside success. We're getting down to who you are. Gentlemen, it's time to get fit. And now, let's get into the show.
All right, welcome back to the Forfeit Fatherhood Podcast, a podcast for fathers by fathers, where we talk about the 4 pillars of fatherhood, which are faith, family, finance, and fitness. And I know you guys are always excited when we have a guest on. And these guys that we've had on in the past have been phenomenal guests. And today is no different. This episode is yet another phenomenal guest. I'm really excited to have him. I think he's the second TED Talk speaker we've had on here, but you've done it a couple times, right?
Yeah, 2 different ones.
Yeah. So you got one leg up. But my guest today is Traver Boehm. Traver, I'm appreciating. Did I say your last name right? Is it Boehm or Boehm?
Did.
Do I have to say the E
either
in
way?
there?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
right.
German, so it's supposed to be like Boehm, but that's weird here in the U.S. So
Yeah. My stepmom is German, so I when you said it just now, I was like, oh, that makes sense. That sounds right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited to have you here, man. I'm sure the guys
Thank
are
you.
going to get a lot of value out of you being here. But for those that don't know you, maybe never heard of you before, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate the space, the opportunity to speak to your audience. I run a men's movement, which is not something I would have thought I would ever say. I run a movement called the Uncivilized, and the specific, it's geared for men, and a men's group called the Uncivilized Nation. And as I said, like, this was not what I planned to do with myself. But a couple years ago, I wrote a book called Today I Rise. And it was about how I used getting divorced and kind of hitting rock bottom as a way to completely change my life. And got sober, quit drinking, got off smoking weed, stopped looking at porn. Really, it was like my awakening moment was this series of losses that happened back to back to back that I wrote about. And what was so odd, Rod, is that men started reaching out to me. Like, I didn't think anybody was going to read. You know, when you like write a book, I threw it on Amazon, and I had like 2 very competing schools of thought. One, like Oprah is going to call me by Thursday, or no one's going to read this thing ever in the history of the book. And somewhere in between the two was this really odd situation that guys started reaching out. I put my email in the book and was like, hey, if this is a curiosity to you, email me. And men, who everyone says like men don't reach out, men don't care, men aren't interested in self-development, men aren't interested in bettering themselves. I would wake up like every day to an email from a guy saying, hey, this was really helpful. Or, hey, I'm going through a divorce, but man, like I'm drinking so much and I'm depressed and I don't know what to do. And I was at a unique point in my life where I just sold a business. I just gotten divorced. I was living in my buddy's house. So I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I was kind of in between big chapters of my life. And so I wrote every single dude back and was like, can I have your phone number? Do you want to get on a call? And I just wanted to know, like, what do you got going on? Tell me more about this situation. And for almost a year of my life, I just talked to men and was like, be honest with me, right? Tell me what's really going on here. You don't know me. I'm not charging you any money. Like, just bare your soul. And by the end of the year, I had so much data that I never was interested in gathering, but more so I had a feel for what men were going through and what they needed to do to shift. And so I compiled all of that in an idea I called Uncivilized, which was, let's take the best of the traditional sort of 1950s Marlboro paradigm, and let's get rid of what doesn't work in that paradigm. And let's also take the best of the sensitive new age sort of nice guy, which had evolved, and let's get rid of the parts of that man that don't work and let's put them together. So it's not like, everybody at that point either wanted to be, and this is actually quite common even today, Rod. Like, there are men's quote programs that are basically just like a bunch of ex-Navy SEALs yelling at dudes for a ton of money.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's also like the very sensitive, it almost feels like we're going to turn you into a new age vegan feminist poet men's groups. No offense to vegan feminist poets, but most guys land somewhere in the middle. Right? Like, I want to be a better man. I want to be a stronger man. I want to do right. I want to work hard. I want to have a mission. I want to have a purpose. And I know I need to be more emotionally intelligent, be able to create more connection with my partner or with my kids, have more feeling, work on my trauma, like work on the shit that's happened to me. And so I threw this idea out on social media. God, it must be like 7 years ago now, called, hey, I have an idea for something called the Uncivilized Man. He's both primal and divine together. What do you guys think? And my life exploded. I was being asked to come speak, to write papers, to contribute, to be on podcasts. And I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm not sure why you want to interview me, right? This was just an idea. But I compiled a lot of the conversations I had for that year and what I thought would be helpful to men in another book called Man Uncivilized. And from there, everything solidified. And now we have men's groups in 35 different cities all over the world. I got a team of 50 male volunteers, like leading teams, leading programs. We have workshops. We have therapists on staff. Like, we're helping men in so many different places in so many different ways. I know that's a long answer to a short question, but that's really what I'm doing now. And again, like, out of the blue, Yeah.
That's awesome, bro. Like, just because I know people who have written a book and thrown it on Amazon, and the 5 of us have bought a copy, and you know what I mean? Like, because there's a lot of books on Amazon. There's a lot of people who are like, I'm gonna write a book. But I think what happened, and obviously, right, is that you hit a vein, right? Like, you were speaking to an audience that was crying for an answer, but no one was answering, right? Or just something that resonated with guys. And I hear that all the time, that guys don't ask questions, guys don't reach out. And I think that's kind of a stigma, right? That's like an idea, or that's like and some of us push that out, right? We project that. Like, we're tough, we don't need help, we don't ask questions. But the reality is and I get it all the time, is DMs of guys like just very, very raw. Like, this is going on, and like a whole like thesis of what's happening in their life. And they're really, really open about it when they finally find somebody who they think will listen, or somebody who understands what they're going through and can relate, and at the very least can just be a sounding board for what they have to say. Because there's too many of us that are just taking the day-to-day and just bottling it up. We're just stuffing it in, and then eventually we explode. And people are like, what happened to him? Like, he was such a nice guy. He was so quiet. He never said anything. Right. But that's because we aren't finding outlets like yours. And it's funny, you mentioned being all over the world. I talked to Matt Hoss a few weeks ago, and he's in Australia, and he was singing your praises and the program, and
amazing
how much it helped change his life and got him turned around on the path that he's on now. And so that's really, really amazing. It's one thing to have impact in your area, right? But to be globally impactful is huge.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I just want to reiterate what you said, because I think it needs to be pointed out. When I have men reach out, most of them have tried before and not been listened to. So I'm fully with you, and I hope your listeners hear this, that when we say, like, men don't reach out, men just need to speak up, men just need to start using their mouths, most guys have. And they've been shut down, they've been ignored, they've been told to get over it, to man up, it's not a big deal, stop whining. Or even worse, if they've done it in romantic relationships, they've been left because of it.
Yeah.
Right? I did an Instagram question about a month ago. have any of you experienced this? Because I had a buddy, still have the buddy, who was in a, quote, very conscious relationship. And his girlfriend kept saying, like, I don't think you're opening up enough. I don't think you're sharing what's fully deep and true for you. And he would talk, he'd come to our men's group and be like, I feel like I am. But there are things about the relationship that I'm also just like, I have questions I don't feel good about. And we're like, hey, she's asking for it. Go tell her. And so he did. And it's so cliche, Rod. She broke up with him right after that conversation. We're like, wait a minute, this is what you've been begging this man for. And I told him, here's what you probably just learned that we need you to unlearn. You learned, if I'm open and vulnerable in a relationship, I get left. What you need to you need to unlearn that and reframe it and go, if I'm open and vulnerable with the wrong person, I get left. And so I threw this question up on Instagram. Hey, have any of you had this happen to you? And it was like my DMs blew up with guys going, yep, I can pinpoint it. I can tell you if I do this, it's normally 2 months later that, a girl leaves. And I was like, man, we got to shift this idea that men aren't vulnerable, men aren't open, men aren't honest, men aren't sharing, and say we need to shift the consequence of that. So there is space and there is availability for men to actually do that, because we're doing it. It just ain't landing, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's funny that you brought that up, is because I see that all the time. And when I first start seeing guys comment that on different posts, I was like, really? Like, because I'm like, you should be able, because I'm obviously with the person I think I'm supposed to be with forever, right? And we have a very open and honest relationship. I can be vulnerable. I feel safe being vulnerable. And I've been with her since high school. Like, we broke up for a year, but back together, right? So as far as relationships go, she's what I know, right? Other than what I've heard from other guys and in conversation, right? But like, that's like a big thing, is guys are like, yo, I can't. Like, if I say something, like, she's going to use it against me. She's going to throw it in my face. They're going to consider me weak. They're going to leave me. And I'm like, really? Like, that's where we're at outside, outside. Cause I'm institutionalized. Like, I don't know what it's like on the outside world, but on the outside world, man, I don't think I would make it. Like, what is that? The Shawshank Redemption, where he's like, Andy, I don't think I can make. I don't think I can make it on the outside world, man. If that's what it is, I can't tell you how I feel. Like, oh man,
how can anybody make it, right? If you can't do it in your romantic relationship, right, with the person that you sleep with, the person you lie next to, the person you want to create life with, if that's your path. And I do understand, I run men's groups. There are things that I will take to my men's group first and say, fellas, I want to like hash this out with you and work this out with you and come to some conclusions. But there are also things that happen in my life that, like, I've had people close to me kill themselves in the last couple of years. What am I not going to tell my partner about that? Am I not going to let her cry and see that I lost a family member? That's absolutely insane. There's no way I would do that. And I will reiterate, I came home, sat her down and was like, you know what? Thank you. At no point in this relationship have I ever felt that you would use this against me, or you have used it against me, or that there's not an open space. And I may have taken that for granted, given how many men, that's not their experience. So I say kudos to your wife as well, or partner as well, for being that kind of support system, because we need it. And it's unfair to ask men so publicly, like, how many memes are there out there that like, men don't open up, we just need men to open up. And then behind the scenes, like you said, are guys going, well, I did once and I'm never doing it again.
Yeah. And it only takes once with us, right? Especially when it's something that can hurt us. Right. We learn very, very quickly when there's some pain associated, especially when it's emotional pain, because we don't even want to deal with emotions in general. And then if I share some emotion with you, like I'm, and then you hurt me. Oh yeah, that's it. You'll never get another chance. And then what happens is what you said, is that bleeds into the next relationship or into other parts of our lives,
for sure.
Which only eventually hurts us, right? It only because that person doesn't care. Like, they don't care anymore, obviously. But then we suffer with it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned a couple times I'm curious, uncivilized, right? You mentioned the 50s, you mentioned current and taking the best of both worlds, but why the word uncivilized?
You know, Rod, I was living in Brooklyn when this all came about, and I had this amazing roommate at the time, a guy named Adam Cobb. He used to just train NBA players. This awesome guy. We had both spoken on the TED stage, and I was moving back into New York. He's like, "Hey, I got an open space," and I, for whatever reason, like at this point in my life, this was not going to be my profession. It was just this tiny little idea where I was like, I'm going to throw a men's group in our building. There's like we lived in this giant building, and I'll make the long story short. I had one guy show up to this event that I thought was going to be, 1,000 people. And we talked for about 45 minutes before he told me, I only came to this event because I followed you on social media from your fitness days, and I need to lose weight. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, well, then let's stop talking about masculinity and tell me a little bit about what you got going on health-wise. And he was a cop. And he's like, oh, man, I just cannot not eat McDonald's burritos. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you came to my men's meeting to tell me that you have like a burrito problem? I'm going to solve your problem right now. Never go to McDonald's again. Right. And we hugged and he left the meeting. And long story short, he actually did end up losing weight, and it was a great story. But here's why he changed my life. Because I went upstairs and I told Adam, this guy just wasted my time. I'm so pissed. I did all this prep. Only one guy showed up, and the dude just can't not eat a burrito. And then Adam and I spent the evening having real conversations. We talked about our dads. We talked about like an incident that he'd had with a girlfriend in high school that still kind of scarred him. Talked about like his relationship. I think he was raised by a stepdad. Like, we got into some real stuff. And the very next morning, we woke up to work out, and this is at like 5 a.m. because he just loved to wake up early. And I'm like, got one eye open, I'm like rubbing my face, and he's like, hey man, before we leave, quick question for you. When was the last time you ate McDonald's? And I just like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't eat that shit. That's civilian food. And that sentence changed my life, because he pulled out his phone, God bless him, and was like, what do you mean civilian food? Now, I've been awake for like 6 minutes, and I've had no coffee. But I said, hey, take a look at this apartment, right? 2 single guys. There's no alcohol in here. There's no drugs in here. Neither of us look at porn. It's 5 a.m. We're about to go get savage on a weight pile in the basement. Last night, we had like real conversations. We talked about pain. We talked about suffering. We talked about love. I was like, this is not how civilized men live. Like, take a look at the quote civilized world. Look at the health statistics. Look at the addiction statistics. Look at divorce rates. Look at depression, anxiety, cancer. Look at sexual assault. Look at every statistic. Men are at the top of every negative statistic. That is the outcome of you plugging yourself into a system that I will call civilized. It will spit you out fat, sick, nearly dead, divorced, uninspired, addicted to a couple different drugs, having an affair with your, I know I'm painting a negative story, but that's unheard of. Right? If you just walk through an airport, you get to see a real snapshot of American men and American people, and it's not good. And this was 6-7 years ago. So I just had this word running around in my head, and kind of what's underneath it. I don't know if you've heard this line, to be in this world, but not of it. Right? I heard it from Wayne Dyer. It may be biblical. I'm not sure, but to be in this world, but not of it. And that was my, some people have said, leave the matrix, but I didn't want to plug myself into the collective unconsciousness and go, yeah, I'll just eat fast food. I'll drink a lot of alcohol, right? I'll have a shitty marriage. I'll have no relationship with my kids. I'll just work for someone else in a cubicle all day long until I get 1 week off a year to go to Vegas and get drunk and sit by the pool and talk about how awesome it is, even though it's not awesome. That to me just felt so common that I wanted to go a different way. And I get it. Like some people have gotten very upset with me with that word. And I get there's a play on words, but I like that because it stops people and makes them think. To me, meditation is uncivilized. Getting up in the morning and going to the gym is uncivilized. Having a podcast where you talk about things that are real as opposed to just a bunch of fake BS, that's uncivilized. You having a long-standing relationship with one woman, that's uncivilized. Knowing your kids, right? Yeah, I can go on and on and on. So that's really where the word came from. And I wanted it to be a punch in the face, Rod. Like my idea at the time was like, I need to wake men up. Because I had just gotten woken up by landing smack on rock bottom. And I didn't want men to have to go through that because you and I both know some guys don't get back up. Yeah. Now, what if we can catch them on the way down, right? And this is all pre-COVID. This is in the middle of Me Too. This is 5-6 years ago before things got really weird. Now I even say things are even more uncivilized. We need them even more. Because what's the civilized world? Man, 2 weeks ago I heard a bunch of kids on Nickelodeon were getting molested the whole time. Everybody on Nickelodeon knew. That's the civilized world. I'm not sure what's happening with Diddy right now, but I think he was like the Epstein of the rap world. And everybody knew. Right. That's civilized. Right? Like, we can talk about corruption. We can talk about politics. We can talk about, you give me any system out there, education, health, pharmaceutical, political. I don't know a lot of people who are like, yeah, that's really working well. I'm really glad we have that. There's no corruption in there, right? The million, you know, like pull a system out of the hat. And it's just, especially here in the West, it's not working. So again, long answer to a short question, but it felt like removal of consciousness, removal of empathy, removal of purpose was necessary to live in the civilized world, and I didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah. I mean well, let's say this. That is a punch in the face. It's definitely a stop. And what is that kind of moment? Uncivilized. Yeah. And you're right though, because looking at literally every system, just as you were saying it, I'm thinking like, what is one? There's got to be one, right? There's got to be one thing that's just, you know, unfallible, like it's just doing well, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And I think the only ones, they're not any of them doing what they're supposed to do, but and the only way we would probably think that any one of them is doing what they're supposed to do is because we've been conditioned to accept it to be that way. Like it just is what it is. Politicians are corrupt. That just is what it is. That's not that doesn't make it okay though, right?
Sure,
like that's not what it should be. And I think you said something earlier, which is kind of like accepting the trajectory of our life. You know, we're going to work all day in a cubicle. We get married and we're gonna have kids. We're gonna be unhappy, but we're gonna go and grind and work because we got to provide for our family. Like all of these things we've subscribed to, right? Yeah. But just like any subscription, there is a cancel button somewhere in there, right? And you don't have to stay subscribed to it. Like you don't have to continue to pay the $9.99 every month. You can pull out. It might take you some time, but you have to notice it. And I think that example is pretty like spot on. And I used it, but because I have subscriptions that I signed up for that I completely forgot about. And every month they're just taking money out of my account and I'm not even paying attention to it. It just is what it is. And I think that's what society is right now for us, is we have just subscribed to certain things just being the way that they are. And we're not even thinking about it. It just is what it is. It's taken away from us and we don't even notice it until we're falling, right? Or things are kind of falling apart around us. And now we're like, whoa, what happened? Yeah, what you're doing is definitely necessary. I mean,
Thank
obviously,
you.
right? Because guys are involved in it, right? How did
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the first meeting, one guy shows up. Now, for most of us, that'd have been like, left turn, right? That's not going the right way. Gotta turn and do something different.
Yeah.
Thought I had a great idea, but it didn't come to fruition. So what's the next thing? What made you stay on that? I mean, the conversation, obviously, right? But
Truthfully, man, two things. And I know people make fun of CrossFit because everyone talks about CrossFit who does it. I started a CrossFit gym in 2009 when nobody knew about it. And I had to explain it to everybody, and everybody thought we were crazy and what was this stupid thing, and it's not going to last, and no one's going to, will never catch on. And then
Right.
2 years later, my phone was ringing off the hook. And so I had that background in business where I just had a sense like, hey, I'm having to explain what men's groups are. Like, no, we don't sit around in the woods naked and drum and rub like period blood on our faces. It's not that. I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it. Guys are saying they don't need it. Guys are saying they don't need it. Women are saying we do need it. Okay, so there's some little bit of an audience that gets it. But I will tell you, man, I am not a religious person classically, but there were so many little pats on the butt or pat on the shoulder along the way from someone or an email or a guy reaching out, like so many times when I'm paying for this thing out of my pocket, I'm not making any money, I'm going into debt, that I would get an email like, hey, your Instagram post saved my life yesterday. Hey, I'm 64 days sober as a guy, and my kids just hugged me for the first time. Like that stuff would come like divinely ordered, Rob. Like I'd be like, you know what? F this. I'm gonna start coaching women who will pay me whatever to like live a better life, or I'll help you find a guy. I kept getting asked, like, I'll give you $5,000. You just gotta help me find a man. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, but I'm broke. And then the email would come, or the DM would come. Right? There's so much that's just out of my control. Goodness came at just the right time. Like the president of my company is a guy named Dave Boyd. Amazing guy. He was in law enforcement. He was one of my private clients as a coach. I coached him. He comes out here to Denver for a big law enforcement conference, like an hour away from me. Drive out to meet him, just shake his hand. And I was like, hey, man, I have this idea about starting a group called the Uncivilized Nation. And I'm curious if you would help me run it. If you would you're much more structured and ordered. I'm more sort of creative and all over the place. And he's like, yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. Do you think it's got any legs? Like, do you think this will actually take off? And I was like, I'm just going on faith, but I think I do. And he was drinking a beer. I was like, hold on, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. He goes to the bathroom. I check my phone, and it's Instagram showing me the very first guy has gotten our logo tattooed on his arm. And Dave comes back from the bathroom, and I show him my phone. I'm like, man, I think this thing may have some legs. I just got chills telling you that story.
Yeah.
And God bless him. Dave goes, well, I got to be honest with you. I've always wanted to move to Colorado. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, sure, if that happens, great. Like everybody wants to move where they go on vacation, 2 years ago, he uprooted his whole family, moved out here to Denver, president of my company. We've got hundreds and hundreds of guys in this movement now, thousands of people all over the world following us. It was those little signs and just some deep belief that I had that this is going to work. It's going to work. I will not quit. If it doesn't work, I don't know what else I'm going to do, because this is my personality. This is me. Like, I'm the primal and the divine. I'm the dude that was a professional cage fighter going to acupuncture school at night. I'm the guy that wants to be, deadlifting all day, but like have emotional intelligence and meditate for a month. Like if this doesn't work, like what am I going to do? Sell cars? What am I going to like sell solar panels? I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And then God bless whoever believed in us. There was a number of people too who I respected who were like, this is going to work. Just don't quit. It's going to work. It's going to work.
Yeah.
A lot of faith.
My mom would say that you were a willing vessel, right? Like you were just willing to continue to move forward to carry the mission regardless of what was going on. And then you kept getting, like you said, these little pats, these little signs, these little signals that say, you know, this is the right path. This is just keep doing it. Okay. So, all right. And
yeah,
look, it is a huge thing now. And so I'm glad that you were willing, right? I'm glad that you were able to work through all of that, because that resilience saved a bunch of guys.
Yeah, it's wild.
You know, saved a bunch of families. You know, just doing God's work, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was a lot of faith.
You mentioned something just a second ago.
A lot of times where I just went, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go for it. I'll come back to it. I'll remember.
Sure. Just to reiterate, it was so much faith, right? And just faith in myself, faith in the belief, faith in and how many people stepped up to help, faith that like whoever, God, the universe, whatever we want to say, like wouldn't have done this to and for me without some kind of bigger plan. Like I just kept coming back to that. Like I didn't write a book for no reason. I didn't have this person come into my life for no reason. And I have to have this undying faith that this is going to work. And I hope guys listening to this hear that and then can apply it to themselves. Right? Yeah. I am not gifted. I am not special. I'm under 6 feet. I got chewed up ears. You can see I don't have hair. Like I'm not Elon Musk. I don't have an IQ I'm not special. But I'm tenacious, resilient, and have faith. And that combination, tenacity, resilience, and faith, man, will that get you through a lot. And if this is the only thing you take from this conversation for guys listening, whether you're in a hard time or you're trying to do something big in the world, that's the trifecta, I think, other than, you know, having just good people around you to help you. So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, I agree. Those 3 things are super, super important for all of us to have, whether we're struggling or whether we're doing well. Like those are things that when you're doing well, you want to continue to be tenacious. You want to continue to have faith. You want to continue to do all those things, because it's not just about when you're struggling, right? Because if you let go of those things when things are going well, you'll be struggling soon. You know, you fall right back. Yeah, just
so true.
That's how life goes, right? You know, you have to, when you're on top, you got to keep fighting to stay on top. You don't get to you just hang out up there. So I was gonna say, you mentioned it a little bit, and you kind of talked about like these opposites that were in your life. Like you were, you know, you're beating people up in the daytime and healing at night. You know, you're doing the meditation, you're doing CrossFit. Like you have these opposites that are kind of going on, and you mentioned the primal and the divine, and that's a part of the book. I know. Is that also a part of the program?
It's the pillars of the movement, where like my mission is to build a movement of 1 million men who express their masculinity through both the primal and the divine. And I felt in the beginning that schism, right? The 1950 Marlboro was more primal. The sensitive New Age guy was more divine, and they were each missing the opposing parts in themselves.
Yeah. So it's like what is that? A Venn diagram where the 2 circles and that part in the middle is the sweet spot, right? Where we are we're stoic but not emotionless or emotionally illiterate, and you know, we have some of the soft skills that we've acquired as we've gotten into the 2020s and the 2000s, and but not too far. as you mentioned earlier, we're not, you know, vegan feminists. And again, no shade if you are a vegan feminist. I'm a feminist, I guess. I don't know. I like women. You know, I'm all for women's rights and stuff like that. But you know, I get what you're saying. So So when guys are coming into the program or reading the book, and they're coming from maybe a valley in their life, right? And they're kind of
Mm.
looking for a lifeline with the
Mhm.
book, or joining the community, and they're just like at their wits end. Maybe they've
Mhm.
asked for help before and haven't got it,
Mhm.
which you mentioned, and I know to be true, has happened, right?
Mhm.
Typically guys are crying out, or have asked for help, or
Mhm.
are looking, but maybe not finding what they're looking for. What would be like your advice for a guy that is feeling like he's kind of been shut out, like he doesn't
Mhm.
have those resources, that he doesn't until now, right? Because he's hearing the podcast, and he
Mhm.
knows now about your book, and he now he knows about the community, and the men's groups and all the things that you have going on. But prior to this, and he's gonna go and look into all of that. But right now he's like struggling.
Yeah. One, I just have compassion for that guy. I think a lot of men, when they're struggling, they literally believe no one gives a shit. Or
Mhm.
even worse, that people are celebrating that they're struggling. Right? So just the first thing for that guy to hear is like, man, I'm sorry. That
Mhm.
sucks. I've been there. Rock bottom sucks. And there's something juicy about that spot, Rod. Like, I'm in the middle right now of writing another book about darkness, about what happens when that entity comes into your life, either through loss or through the collective darkness, the challenge of the times. I actually believe that there's information down available on rock bottom, like these real hard truths that you can pick up and look at when you're in the shit of the shit, that aren't available when you're up here and things are going great, right? So I want that man, first of all, just to take a breath and go,
Mhm.
okay, acknowledge to yourself, I don't want to be here, but for whatever reason, I'm here. And so there's an idea, right? The premise of my first book was this idea called One Day Stronger. But that was my mantra to myself when I was getting divorced. I was like, today sucked. Had to deal with attorneys, lost a bunch of stuff, had to give my dog up. Cool. You know what I'll be tomorrow? Tomorrow I will be one day stronger than I am today. And that's what carried me through a lot of hard days. I was like, cool. It's like a hard workout. Didn't like it, threw up, sweat all over the place. Tomorrow I'm going to be stronger. So
Yeah.
there's some reframing that guys can do, that I don't want it to sound bypassy, right? Bypassy is when you're sitting on rock bottom going, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so glad I'm here. I'm going to learn so much. It's going to be the best. Just acknowledge that it's not fun.
Right.
But then in the seed of that darkness is opportunity. And you go, okay, what can I learn from this? How do I want to be different moving forward? What was I doing? And this is tough to hear for a lot of people, but I did this. What was my role in getting here?
Man.
Even if you feel like you are the victim, you didn't do anything. What was my role in getting here? And if you can't come up with that, what do you want your role to be? Getting yourself out of it. That's a lot. Like right there, that's just a lot, right?
Mhm.
I remember it was actually a coach, Rod, asking me, what's amazing about this situation, when I was at rock bottom. And I was not happy with that question. Right? It's like, you can go F yourself. I do not want. And she's like, really? How many books have you read since your wife left? How many ideas have you had for a whole new way of living for you? Whole new business? How many days sober are you? How many people have you met that you wouldn't have met if you'd just been in that same routine of your marriage and business, right? And I was like, damn it, you're right. There's like a couple good things. And just that was enough to create a bit of momentum. And then also, I think this is really important. Those dark times and that rock bottom space is very fertile ground to listen.
Mhm.
What is God telling you? What is the universe telling you? What are the whispers? I had so many things come through me. I'm like, oh man, I think I may start writing. Okay, that's a big deal, isn't it? I was like a blogger beforehand, but I only wrote about fitness. Remember hearing some voice saying like, no, you got to start sharing your story. And I was like, no one wants to hear about my story. Well, try it anyway. What do you know? I start sharing my story. What do you know? People start getting interested in that. People are interested in having me around and talking about my story.
Okay.
Some other things open up. So again, like I don't want people to think this is like Rock Bottom isn't a networking event. You know, it's not a Tony Robbins workshop, but
Right.
it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity. We can, if we zoom out, there are big chapters in our lives, and these big chapters end. And in between chapters, there is this really painful time when we don't know what we're going to do, and we don't know if we're ever going to love again, and we don't know how we're going to get ourselves out of it. But I think when we can frame that as, oh, I'm just in between chapters right now. And guess what? Something big just fell away. My job right now, the only thing I need to focus on is how do I get myself okay again? Is it therapy? Is it reaching out to men's groups? Is it reaching out to friends? Is it going for a walk? Is it reading more powerful books? Is it laying off the booze? Is it quitting smoking cigarettes? I don't care what it is, but it's like something. One of the reasons, you know, I wasn't an alcoholic, but one of the reasons I quit drinking was like, I want to, at the end of every day, put like a little positive jelly bean in a jar. Like, didn't drink today, jelly bean in a jar. Right. And 7 days in, it was like, wow, I got 7 things in the bottom of that jar. Those are all wins. I had to like stack imaginary wins up for myself. This makes sense? Like,
yes, 100%. 100%.
yeah, take a little ownership, right? Like, I get that guys get on tough times, man. And I get that it doesn't feel like you can get yourself out of it. I've had people close to me take their own lives. And I get like how dark it can be. And I also have been the guy who picked up the phone because some stranger got my number off a podcast where I said, hey, if you're struggling, call me. And had guys say like, hey, I think I'm going to kill myself. I'm like, okay, let me connect you with someone who's more qualified than I am to talk to you. And I know those guys now. They're doing great. Right? They've gotten through that period. So I think just helping guys see like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We have a ethos tenet, Rod. It's the very last one. It's called fight hurt. You got to fight hurt sometimes, right? My last fight, I had a broken neck, torn ACL, last professional fight. I got in that damn cage and fought anyway. And now I have a therapist that works with me. He's been a therapist for 50 years. He's a genius. And I remember asking him, like, what's the one thing people who are really, really struggling need to know? And he goes, you got to fight for your life. You got to fight for your life as if someone's trying to physically kill you. That's how you got to claw, you got to scratch, you got to bite, you got to fight for your life. And I was like, oh man, whew, I just got chills telling you that. Like, I wish every dude on rock bottom could get whatever chip that man put in me, put in them, and go like, all right, I don't care if you get your ass kicked again, but you throw one fucking punch today. You punch back at least once, whether that's putting the bottle down, going for a walk, calling a friend, you know, sitting in meditation, doing 20 push-ups. I don't care what it is.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a haymaker. Throw a jab. Right?
Throw a jab.
There's something out there. And while you're talking, this is how my mind works. I'm always like, there's always these metaphors and things that are going on in my head, and I'm relating stuff to things. Last summer, we took our daughters. We're in California, so we took our daughters up to I'm from the Bay Area, but we took them up to American River, which is like the site of the 49ers, right? Like the actual 49ers, not my favorite team, but the actual 49ers, right? So we had an opportunity to do some mining for gold. And let me just say, we've got what are like somewhat modern but old technology that we're using for this mining for gold situation. And it's not back-breaking work, but my back was on fire, like trying to do this thing. But the reason I bring it up is because the water's freezing cold, and it's July, but it's freezing cold water. And you're in there, you can't see anything because the water's not clear. You're literally sifting dirt and mud through, like, you're making it worse. You're making the water even cloudier, right? But you're doing that work because of like just a little speck of gold that you find. And like my daughters were in there, we're all in there, we're getting muddy, and we're struggling, got nothing the first couple of pans. And then finally my youngest, she sifts a little bit and she finds one, and it was like we won the World Series, man. Like everybody's like cheering and excited because all of that hard work, right? Like all that hard work and digging in the dirt and being, like you said, kind of at rock bottom in that particular situation. Like we were in the mud. But we were just fighting and digging and clawing, trying to find some little light at the end of the tunnel. Just just give me a piece, just a little piece of gold. I mean, it's not even worth anything. It's worth, it's worth like 20 cents. But if I found a 20-cent piece of gold, you could see like how they lit up like Christmas trees. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about that situation and being at rock bottom and digging and just fighting and scratching and clawing, and it's tough and it's uncomfortable, it's cold and it's hot, and it's my back was hurting and my arms are getting tired, and the kids they're near their end, like, Dad, this isn't working. Now I'm concerned because I told them they were gonna find gold, and now Dad looks like a liar. And all this is like weighing on us. And then finally it happens, and we find a piece of gold. And then wouldn't you know it, the next couple of pans, they're not like I guess you would call that a nugget that she found, but you can see flakes now. All of a sudden there's flakes in every pan, and there's like, oh man, we're finding gold left and right. Now we're all excited. And it was just that little bit. We just hit the right spot. And she knocked something loose, and now we found that, and now all of this stuff is kind of starting to happen for us and starting to kind of go in our favor. But had we given up, right? Like you see the meme of it's two guys in a mine, and they got their picks, and there's like the diamonds, and you just might be one swing away from hitting pay dirt. You just got to keep fighting, keep swinging, keep digging. For sure. Because you don't know what that next swing is going to bring, right? It might be the one. It might be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
1,000%, right? Or it may also be something I call the invisible step. It's the thing that gets you to the point where you can actually see what you're looking for. It's not the breakthrough. Right? It's not the big, like, oh my God, we got 50 pounds of gold. But it's the step that you need to take where you get up and you look around and go, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm going to go here. Maybe I'm going to do this. Like, I think a lot of men also believe that coming out of hard times or success is this very linear process. And it's not. Right? It's these micro steps and these steps back and these steps forward. But I love the idea, because I know I did it for like 3 weeks, Rod. I was a divorce coach. I was like, I just want to work with guys going through a divorce. And then I went to an event, and then people ask, like, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I'm a divorce coach. And I would get a tiny little stomach ache. I was like, I don't know if that's really what I want to do. And I remember sitting at that event and watching speakers up on the stage talk about, and it was Esther Perel talking about masculinity. And I was like, I know what I want to do. I don't want to be a divorce coach. I want to talk to men about men's stuff. But had I not taken that step and wanted to go to that event as a divorce coach to network and share and try to get clients, I would have missed her talk. and I wouldn't be here today. So I think that's also a fair thing to share with your audience.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because it's one of those situations where you never know where that thing is going to come from, you know, and just, again, you being an open and willing vessel, and then that kind of fell into your lap because you were willing to kind of put yourself out there and be in the midst of it. And I often wonder, like, how many of those things are like happening around us all the time, and we're like, you know, we're just missing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that we're just like, it's like they talk about football being a game of inches. Like, we're just 1 inch away all the time from like this thing that could change everything for us, and we just don't know. And you mentioned it. Yeah, and you mentioned that you know, just being faithful, like it could that could be the thing if we believed it was a thing, right? If we believed it was even a possibility, that might be it. But we don't think that that's it, right? It doesn't make sense to us for that to be it. Like, you don't want to be a divorce coach. I'm not going to this thing. I don't even want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But just having the wherewithal to make that happen is super cool, man. Super cool. Where to next, man? So you're writing another book, and I'm excited for that to come out. I actually have to go back now, and I've got to read both of these. I got to digest them and get them completed.
Please.
And then I got to talk about it on the podcast and elsewhere. But I'm excited for that opportunity. And then you're gonna throw another one at me before I get a chance to get these two. So writing books, being an author now, right? Because the first time you're just kind of throwing it out there. Is that just kind of you get a feel for something that needs to be said or something you're experiencing, and then you just kind of write about it? Or is it you have, you know, a certain thing you just want to talk about, and then you start looking for things that connect to that?
My first book came because I was not quite divorced, but as I said, I was living in my buddy's house. I didn't have to pay rent. I had income coming from selling a business, and I was depressed. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I didn't know. I was in between chapters, Rod. And my best friend called me, and he goes, "Man, this is not you. Like, you got to figure out something to do. So why don't you do this? Why don't you write 65 individual letters to the you who woke up and found out your wife was leaving that day by day by day?" And I was like, man. He's like, "You think you can do that?" He's like, "Maybe if you do it, you can turn it into like an email funnel that's like 65 emails long. You can sell a course at the end of it." And I remember talking to him and going, no, I don't want to sell a course. I'm going to write 90 letters, and I'm going to turn it into a book. And he was like, "Cool." And then boom, next 6 weeks, that's all I did. And then same thing with Man Uncivilized. I kept having guys reach out and say, "Hey, do you have all this information in the same place?" And I was like, "No, I got Instagram posts, and I think about the same thing. I have notes in a notebook." Then it was like, "Woof, you know what? It's time to sit down again and write another book." And boom, for the next 90 days, I didn't leave the house. I was like a sick person. I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And then it was 4 years later, and I had to build a business. I had to build so much that took me away from writing. And I remember missing writing, or I was writing, I write a lot of sales copy and emails and stuff like that. And then a year ago, my male cousin committed suicide. And I thought, man, I have therapists on staff. Like, God, how can it be that men who I've never met have said, "Your work has saved my life," and a man in my family took his own life? I couldn't make those two things come together, right? I couldn't, I'm not sure, I'm missing the word, but you get what I'm saying. I couldn't reconcile that thought. And so I was sitting at my breakfast table here in the house and was like, God damn, how did that happen? How could that happen? And then woof, I got chills and I started crying. And I was like, okay, I got to write another book. I got to write about darkness. I got to share these stories that have been in the back of my mind about this experience I had years ago in a meditation thing. And I was like, okay, and that's it. And and then you want to know a little magic? I make that decision. I'm thinking, all right, I've self-published 2 books. I think I want to have a publisher on this next one. That day, I go on Instagram and I see a post by a guy who very, 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 very rarely posts. It's a dude I met 16 years ago, kickboxing in Thailand. We were both in Thailand fighting at the same time. He left Thailand and started a publishing company. And I said, hey, just checking in, seeing what you're up to, man. I don't see you on here very much. And he wrote me back, I swear to God, and said, oh, you know what? I've been on your newsletter list for years. If you ever want to publish a book, you should talk to me. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Right? Got on the phone with him a week later and signed a deal that he's publishing my book. So it's a mix. You know?
Wow.
I tend to, I'm going to use your language. I'm a vessel for it. It's not my words. It's not my ideas. It's whatever God has in mind that says, hey, the way you put stuff together verbally cuts through a lot of people's defenses. It cuts through a lot of people's ego. So let's use you to write this next book on this subject. That's how I feel it is. And I've been writing my butt off since.
Well, we certainly appreciate it, man. Like I said earlier,
thank you.
You've impacted and changed lives, right? You've changed not only the lives of the men that who've read the book, but also women who've read the book, and subsequently their families. You know, that's I think the next layer of it is that you're affecting households, which is huge. That's got to feel really good to be able to put something out, even if you're just the best one and not your words, but to be able to put them together and just put it out there and allow people to take it and grow and go from it is that's got to feel great.
It's never lost on me, man. Like I hope I never get to a point where someone sends me an email saying, thank you for your work. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so sick of these. I hope I never get there. I write everybody back who writes me. It never gets lost on me. I even tell my team, like in the company, like, don't ever let it get lost on you guys either. That this is an honor and it is a privilege and it will not be here forever. So take it every time we get one of these messages or every time we shake someone's hand in an event and they tell us that, like, remember, this is why we're doing that.
Man, this is a distinct honor and privilege to have you on the podcast, because, and I'm just gonna keep giving you flowers, man, because the impact that you've had. I think for guys that are listening may not have gotten an opportunity to hear you talk about it this way, right? They follow you on Instagram or listen to other podcasts, and you know there's a lot of Traver out there, right? But to be able to kind of get it into one spot, and be able to digest it and take the lessons and hear some of the things that you talked about, tenacity and faith and some of those other things. I think this is super beneficial for the guys that are listening. It's great for me. I'm selfishly enjoying myself. If I have to ask you, like I said, I don't typically have a list of questions, just kind of let it go. But these questions I do have, that I kind of ask all the time. And one of those is and it's kind of what you're doing. So this might be easy for you. If you had one message, let's say we're able, I did some phenomenal marketing, got every guy on to listen to this podcast. They're all tuning in right now. As a matter of fact, they're tuning in like this second. They made it through all of that, right? They didn't fall off. They didn't have to get out of the car. They're listening all the way through. But this is the point, that they're all tuned in. If you had a message that you wanted them to hear, something you wanted to say directly to them, what would that message be?
Believe in yourself and believe in your heart. And believe in something bigger than yourself. That trifecta. Like, you got to believe in yourself, man. This would not exist if I didn't believe in myself. And it wasn't arrogance, Rod. It wasn't like, I'm the best, and so this has to work. It was a lot of days. It was like, man, I'm just fighting on faith alone. And I believe in my heart of hearts. Like when I close my eyes and put my hand on my chest, there's value in there for me to share with the world. This isn't my mind. I'm not a scientist or a genius. This is my heart that I lean into and lean up against and brush up against and say to the world, here, let me rip my chest open and just let whatever's in here pour out. And then lastly, believe in something other than yourself. Believe in magic, believe in nature, believe in God, believe in something bigger than you. That you do all three of those, and I think if we did that as a country, we did that as a collective, especially men, think of how much less shit we'd buy.
Mm-hmm.
Think of how much healthier we'd be. Think of all the stuff we wouldn't chase. Like there's a whole world going on inside of ourselves that's connected to something bigger than ourselves because we're connected to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the juice, man. Like we have gotten unrelationalized. Just made that word up. But as men, haven't we? Like there's so many movements that are like, just disappear for a year and do push-ups and have a podcast and don't talk to anybody and come back a god. And you're like, wait, why do I have to disappear for a year? Why can't I have friends? Why can't I have brothers? Why can't I talk to my like parents and kids and loved ones? And why do I have to disappear? Be relational, right? The relational aspect of masculinity. I think I know when I was looking and searching, I couldn't find it. There was a lot of red pill stuff, right? Or there was a lot of bypass, which isn't relational. Believe in yourself, believe in your heart, and believe in something bigger than you. And follow those, right? I get a lot of guys, midlife, let's call it, not crisis, but like, hey man, I've checked the boxes. I know how to make money. I know how to move my body. I have a wife. I have a kid. I have the cars. I have the house. Not a lot. I'm not talking about millionaires or billionaires. I got all the things, but I'm not satisfied. And I'm like, cool. Do you think you just need more houses, more cars, more money, more women, more kids? And like, no,
right?
Because a lot of people try that, and I'm going to tell you, it's probably not the right thing. So, what does your heart want from you? What does your soul want from you? Why did God put you on this earth at this time? Like those are deep questions that you don't just knock out over coffee. You sit with yourself and you feel into those. And then here's the juice. You let them be real. You let the answers be real. You and I think, live in a world where we do follow that stuff. All of my friends, all the guys I hang with, they just followed their heart. Why do you do this thing that you do? I don't know. I just can't not do it. I'm just following my heart. I don't know. I call it like a soul whisper. Like I did the thing. I was so miserable at my most, quote, successful. And here I am doing something wildly irrational that my people disapprove of, or they think I'm crazy. And I got to tell you, I sleep like a baby. I'm like, cool, you're on the right track. That's how life is meant to be lived. And maybe you'll get a Porsche and maybe you won't. But here's the deal. You won't care. Because you don't get to take any of that shit with you. But I've been with people on their dying day, right? I spent a year volunteering in hospice. And not a single person on their dying day was like, man, I miss that car. That car was everything to me. Nobody. But I do have a lot of people go, man, I miss my kids. Man, I miss my wife. Man, I hope so-and-so's in heaven when I get there. Man, I'm so glad I took that risk. I'm so glad I tried. I'm so glad I made that phone call. I'm so glad I apologized and mended that relationship. That's like, believe, gentlemen, believe. We live in a society that wants to cut you off from belief. So we can cut you off from belief. We can sell you shit. We can feed you shit, and we can fly you to foreign countries and get you to kill people. But if we believe in our hearts and we believe in something bigger, we just all be like, hey man, I'm going to go find my peace. I'm going to go build my own path. I'm going to go walk that path with joy in my heart and connection and love. And I know for some people listening, it's like, what are you guys talking about? Is this a bunch of hippie shit? No, this is actual satisfaction, right? This is actual joy. And I respect the military. I respect police. I respect people doing hard jobs. And I think if we that's it. Just believe. That's all I'll say. Believe.
Yeah. Look, I that right there, if we were able to get everybody to listen and they tuned in right there, that was for sure the message that they all need to hear. I agree. I can't add anything to it. That was it. That was all of it. Man. So if guys are wanting to, not many ladies listen to the podcast, but if they are and they're wanting to reach out or to get in touch with you or to connect with you in some way, what's the best way for them to do that?
Hit up my site, manuncivilized.com. You can hit me up on Instagram. I'm at Traver Boehm, TraverBoehm. If you put Uncivilized anywhere in Instagram, you'll get a bunch of our teams and affiliates. Check out my podcast, the Uncivilized Podcast. But first, guys, get your hands on the book. Like, that gives you a great framework from which to understand all the things that I'll tell you. But yeah, I answer all my own emails. I answer my phone. It's still weird to me when people are like, wow, you answer your own phone and you answer your own DMs. I'm like, yes, I'm a human. I answer them. So if something in this podcast inspired you or you got a question, DM me. Let me know. I'd love to hear from your audience, Rod. I'd love to.
Awesome. So you hear that, fellas. Don't be shy. Reach out, ask questions, make him change his mind about answering all those DMs. That's our goal, right? Is to send him all the questions, right? All the questions we have.
Send them.
And Traver, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us, sir. To share your story, to share all of the things that you shared with us in the last hour. I really, really appreciate you doing that and taking the time out of your day, because I know how busy life can be. And, anytime somebody sets aside time, which is our most valuable asset, I am grateful, super grateful for it. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you. I know you're giving your time. I know you're sharing your heart. And so it's a pleasure and an honor for me just to be a small part of that. So thank you on behalf of all men for your podcast, for the work that you put in and how you live and present yourself as a man, as a father as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, man, I'm going to let you go so you can enjoy the rest of what sunlight you do have today. and I'm going to go do the same. My daughter's got a softball game later tonight, so I got to go do some work and then head out to the old ball field. So thank you for taking the time, and then I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, Rod. Take care.
You just tuned into another episode of the Forfeit Fatherhood podcast. Thank you once again for listening. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow me at You Can Call Me Coach on Instagram. Also follow the podcast at Forfeit Fatherhood, the number 4 and the letter U on You Can Call Me Coach. Go ahead and flip over to the next episode, man. I know you love this one, so you'll probably love the next one. Excited for you guys to hear it.